Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. I hope that today finds you doing super well. It is an incredibly beautiful day today, and I think I am about at the point where I am going to be able to, without a jacket, put on some shoes and go outside and say good morning to the birds when I have a cup of coffee in hand and go talk to the plants because that's what I do. Because I live in the woods in Maine. And why else do you move to Maine except to go outside and talk to the birds and the plants, right? Because they've closed our beaches, which they needed to. I'm not complaining about closing the beaches. So welcome to Tuesday. Welcome to our third day in our 6-week journey of developing the capability. And today we are talking about what you do instead of the things that you said you would do and documenting that reality. Okay. This is a concept introduced by my coach, Brooke Castillo, and it's called buffering. All right. I also call this work instead. When I talk with my clients about this, it's all what is the work that you are doing instead of the work that you said you would do. Okay. And it is, when we started talking about the concept of work instead or buffering or whatever, it's very easy for people to start beating themselves up, okay? Because we're used to having the conversation around food. So like if you're a binge eater, what you do instead of doing what you said you would do is binge eat, right? It's very known, it's very defined. I think there's something in the DSM about binge eating. It might actually be a defined pathology, right? And however, there is no level of defined pathology around most of what we're talking about today. So now when I introduced this, I introduced it from the concept of alcohol, okay? And I split up booze and food for a reason. All right, there's one known, I lied, there's one known medical use for ethyl alcohol, ETOH, or the drinkable sort of booze. There are other kinds of alcohol, don't drink those. Isopropyl and methanol, okay? Those will kill your kidneys. And the one known medical use for ethanol is to bind up propylene glycol in your body in case you ingest antifreeze. So this is a known treatment for antifreeze toxicity in dogs. All right, because dogs do stupid things like drink the antifreeze because it tastes sweet. Propylene glycol, it's got a glycogen backbone, but it's nephrotoxic, we call it. Okay, so there is one known internal medicinal use for booze, but other than that. There are no known safe quantities of alcohol. There are studies out there about how red wine may in fact be, peripherally vasodilating and it has antioxidants and things like that. You can get all of that stuff from other sources of foods and drinks that don't kill your kidneys and don't kill brain cells and don't kill your liver. Okay, so we don't have to have booze. You can live your entire life with zero amount of alcohol consumed. Okay. You can live your whole entire life with zero amount of cannabis consumed. But the truth is that we drink, we use cannabis, and we use all sorts of other things in our life so that we can avoid the emotional intensity of the life that we have. And I get it. I'm human too. And the difference between me and a lot of other folks is I understand how and when I choose to move away from emotional intensity. And most of the time I do it with pretty good intention. Okay. I know when I am doing things instead of doing what I said I was doing. That's it, okay? That, I promise you, is a learned and learnable skill. And I've talked some about my journey. Like last week, I talked about my journey with alcohol. And it's a learned and learnable skill to understand where you are and what you are doing with the things that you're doing in your life not to feel your own feelings, okay? And in this first week of what we're laying out and developing our capabilities, all we're working on is telling ourselves the truth about where we are right now. So yesterday we told ourselves the truth about what the number is on the scale, what are the foods that we eat, how are we going about approaching food and weight and those sorts of things in our life. And today we're just going to have the same conversation about alcohol. You can lump cannabis, any sort of addictive sorts of behaviors are in there. So you can put cannabis in there. We're going to talk about social media and all different kinds of social media and all the different ways you can go about measuring the truth of where you are right now. And the question is then, why do you want to tell yourself the truth? Why would you want to tell yourself the truth? And I'm not going to lie, like telling yourself a lie feels a lot better a lot of the time. Like we're going through this with my 12-year-old. It feels a lot better in the short term to lie. And there are a lot of people who never move past that. That not telling ourselves the truth about the lives that we're in does feel better a lot of the times because then we don't have to think about it. All we have to worry about is seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, which is what we do anyway. And if we're in denial about our truth, end of story, we don't have to do any more work, right? But the question is that really how you want to live your life? Is that how you can go out and be the person the universe is calling you to be? And when I talk about building assets in your life, and we come to all of this work from this sense of if I build assets in my life, I will create the life that I want. It's exactly the same. If I build assets in my business, I'll create the business that I want, right? The assets in your life are very, we've covered these before, but they're very simple. It's your mind and managing your mind. Your brain is your biggest asset. Then it's the trust and credibility that you've created within the relationships around you. Those are also in your mind. It's like a subset of mind management. There are the products and the processes, and then finally the stuff in your life. And when we look at all the things that we do, instead of doing what we said we were going to do, then we can work to understand the truth of all of those different things, okay? The reason that we do work instead of doing what we said we were going to do, or we drink instead of doing what we said we were going to do, or we go on Facebook, or we go on Instagram, or play video games, or whatever it is because we have emotionally intense experiences that we are uncomfortable processing. Food Safety Cat is joining us for coaching today. And so these intense emotional experiences are part of being human, but most people don't know how to process them. All right. And that's through no fault of your own. It's probably because you've never been taught, right? And that's what we're here to do. We're here to teach those skills. So we have these emotionally intense processes and we seek to move away from them. We move away from negative experience. But the problem is that unless we recognize that negative experience and process the emotion, we move away from negative experience, but we're not actually moving towards positive experience. The only way to positive experience is through negative experience, okay? And you've got to develop the capability of presence and acceptance of negative experience, potentially by deciding that you are up to the task of experiencing negative emotions. What if you were up to the task of experiencing negative emotions? What would your life look like at that point? Well, most of us are not up to the task of experiencing negative emotions, and now we get to dive into learning how to do that. And a lot of that just looks like sitting with those negative emotions. Sitting with those negative emotions and learning that in this very present time, whether you're fear or panic or anxiety, vulnerability, insufficiency, that's a negative emotion, right? And all of these negative emotions. What does it look like to have those negative emotions and not do anything about it and know that they are not killing you in this moment? And instead of distracting yourself and eating some chocolate or distracting yourself and going onto Facebook or distracting yourself and going out for a run, right? Just sitting there with those negative emotions. That's really very hard to do, but you can work up to doing that. And that is the opposite of running away from your negative emotions. When we run away from our negative emotions, some of us literally run, like I'm totally guilty of. I used before I got injured, going out for a run to literally run away from my negative emotions, right? Going for a swim, like pounding myself in the pool so that I could run away from negative emotions. Going out to the tennis court and smacking tennis balls until I feel better. Those are all physical ways of running away from negative emotion. We have lots of physical ways of running away from negative emotion. This happens, okay? And the other people eat. Other people go on social media. Sitting with your negative emotions and knowing that they are not going to kill you. And the Brené Brown's research literally shows it takes between like 17 seconds and 2 minutes of tolerating those negative emotions rolling over you for your brain to figure out they're literally not going to kill you, okay? So this requires emotional energy. I'm not going to lie, it requires emotional energy, okay? And if you can just sit there and breathe in and breathe out, okay, use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, okay? Feel your negative emotion. Look for 5 things and name 5 things around you, all right? Give yourself permission to feel your negative emotion, and you're going to touch 4 things around you. Give yourself permission to feel your negative emotion, okay? And you're going to listen for 3 things around you. Give yourself permission to feel your negative emotion. And smell 2 things around you, okay? Give yourself permission to feel your negative emotion and taste 1 thing. Now, if you don't have anything in front of you to taste, here's a thought. Remember the taste of salt water. You are mostly made of salt water, or as we say in Star Trek land, ugly bags of mostly water, and that's mostly salt water, right? Remember the taste of salt water in your mouth, okay? And it literally changes how you, like the pH of your mouth, okay? It's a very physical change to help you bring back. And by the time you do all of that, you will be well on your way to actually processing that negative emotion and looking at that urge, whether it's an urge to drink or to go consume an edible or smoke a joint or get on social media or dive into whatever thing that you're doing instead of feeling your feelings. And that is incredibly powerful. Okay, that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise that I just did, it can be incredibly powerful in feeling an urge, okay? Because here's what we're going to do this week. And I'm going to go over all of that stuff again next week. Next week is all about feeling feelings. But I wanted to put that out there this week because it's incredible. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Because you're going to find out when you start telling yourself the truth of your reality around alcohol, other addictive substances, and all the things that you do instead of the things that you said you were going to do, is that reality can feel super uncomfortable. Okay, so I have a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts to dive into as we look at documenting the reality around what we do instead of doing what we said we were going to do. Okay, so if we're just going to start at alcohol, one of the things to count is the number of drinks that you have, the number of drinks that you have a day, when you drink. Those are all neutral. Okay, that you drink, when you drink, and how much you drink are just numbers. They are completely neutral. It's just like the weight on the scale. The weight on the scale is a reflection of mass times gravity. All right, and the number of drinks that you drink is just a reflection of the number of drinks that you drink. It means nothing about you as a human being. It means nothing about your worthiness, okay? What does it look like, especially as we're in confinement here, the amount of time you spend thinking about and going out on special trips that are centered around alcohol or whatever other addictive substance you are talking about, okay? All of that is an amount of time, okay? For example, back when we were drinking, I would, when I was coming home, so to get to Maine, you have to go through New Hampshire. Fun trivia fact, Maine is the only state bordered by one state. But to get to Maine, you have to go through New Hampshire, and you have to drive up 90, among other ways, you can drive up 95. And of course, there's like the State Line liquor store in New Hampshire. That's so famous. They wrote about it in the New York Times, right? And I drive through there. I used to drive through there all the time, and I would make special stops to go to the liquor store and spend money and spend time on my way home from trips, typically New York, because I would drive to New York. And I would stop there and go to the bathroom and then go stock up on booze, get a glass of wine, all of that sort of stuff. Okay, if that is the sort of thing that you do, there's a ton of data that you have right there. Time spent thinking about that trip and planning that trip, actual time in that trip, number of bottles of alcohol that you bought, the kind of alcohol that you bought, the amount of money that you spent. Okay, documenting all of that reality, okay, and then doing thought downloads around all of that reality, okay? Keeping in mind that those thoughts may or may not be true, right? This is not, as I'm working on workbooks. So like for my coaching group, I write these workbooks. And I was working on the May workbook yesterday and getting our May workbook out into the world. And there's this part of the May workbook where I say the point of this work is not to find new and interesting ways to beat yourself up. This is not new and interesting ways to beat yourself up. I'm sure you have all the creative ways you ever will need to beat yourself up, and we're moving past that, okay? Documenting reality is a powerful first step to take and a powerful choice to make in your life, so that you can understand where you are and start your worthiness journey from a place of telling yourself the truth, right? One of the things that you can do to have your own back is to tell yourself the truth about your life as it is right now, okay? And the more you do that with yourself, the more you will be able to create evidence of your own worthiness. And if you need help with your worthiness, borrow my confidence in your worthiness. You are 100% worthy. You are 100% lovable right now as you are, no matter how much you drink, no matter anything that is going on outside or inside your own head, you are 100% worthy, okay? Another thing that you could document, and you could also document this with food, is the number of emotional energy hours spent managing alcohol. So over in food and salami production, we have this concept called degree hours, which is the amount of time meat in fermentation spends above 60 degrees, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And the amount of time it's given drop to a pH of 5.3, and we call those degree hours. It has to be at a certain number of degrees in a certain number of hours. Well, I took that idea and I have this concept around emotional energy hours, okay? If you are spending a crap ton of time beating yourself up around alcohol consumption or anything, or food or social media or whatever, those are emotional energy hours. And I was doing some work with my own coach today, watching one of her videos. And one of the things that coaching allows us to do is to see the possibility of what won't happen in our lives if we don't apply coaching. Okay. And there are a ton of things that if I didn't apply coaching, I would never have lost the weight. Never. If I didn't apply coaching, I would never have probably come up with the medical locker and the gray locker, which is going to go and transform It's going to transform emergency response. Okay, I would never have come up with that stuff. I would never have come up with the idea to do all of this group coaching work that I do with my people. I would never have come up with the idea around the developing the capabilities book that I'm writing. None of that. I would have done none of that. And life is going to literally translate into hundreds of millions of dollars. So my question for you is, can you calculate the amount of time that you spend reacting and emotionally managing whatever it is that you are using to run away from your own feelings? Okay, so what does that look like? Once I gave up drinking, one of my favorite ways to run away from my own feelings was to get into political arguments on Facebook. Okay, some of you have been on the receiving end of those political arguments on Facebook, right? And then I took a look at not only the time, the sheer volume of hours that I was spending on Facebook, and there are apps for like counting that sort of stuff, but the amount of time afterwards that I was calculating, right? So I have the amount, so I would spend another hour in my head reading whatever Facebook post it was, right? There's that amount of time, so it's an hour. But there is an opportunity cost to that hour. The opportunity cost is that is an hour that I didn't spend on my priorities. So in the April work with my group, I had everybody list out what their priorities are. Okay, and my top 5 priorities are sleep, loving the family, growing and scaling the business, serving my customers, and following my protocols. Those are my top 5 priorities in my life. When I am on Facebook getting into emotionally charged conversations on Facebook or other forms of social media, or getting ripped about something in the New York Times, there's all that time that I spend on it. But then there's a shadow time that I spend on it, which is the time I spend relitigating stuff in my head, or talking with Andrew or my brother or any of the other people I have political conversations about whatever it is that is going on. Okay, so that's also time that I spend. But then there's this huge opportunity cost, because when I am in anger around things that are going on out in the universe, I am not showing up to any of these priorities and building assets in my life and my business so that I can better solve the problems the universe is calling me to solve. Okay? Because my emotional energy, we have a finite amount of emotional energy in our lives, and my emotional energy is being spent on anger at something that somebody in the Trump administration is doing. Right? Like, how many of us, be honest, how many of us spend more than we want emotional anger on things that are going on with people who we disagree with politically? We spend a lot of it. And those 3 levels of time, the time actually spent doing the posting or drinking the drink, the time in the results of that. Okay, so it's the hangover the next morning, it's the headache, it's the feeling terrible, or it's the bringing the argument and dissipating the emotional intensity with your partner or spouse or friends. Okay? And then the third thing is that the things that you didn't solve, the things that you didn't solve with the spending of the hours of those hours. Okay. And that ends up being a lot of really, really meaningful time. So what does it look like to do a time journal, all right, around the things that you do instead of what you said you would do? And it's not to beat yourself up. It's to develop awareness. It's to define and document reality and make the choice to tell yourself the truth of your life. Because you can develop the capability to tell yourself the truth of your life. And that's a capability worth creating because there's so much for you to be out there doing, and so many people for you to be doing it with, and so much community for you to be building. And while specifically with alcohol, it feels like we do that with alcohol, but in reality, we don't. We don't do that with alcohol. We'd like to think that alcohol helps us do that, but if you do all of that stuff without the alcohol, you will get so much more done. Okay, and we'll talk more about that. I mean, we got lots of time to talk about this. And so, if we bring it back to the assets that we talk about growing your life from assets, you can document from a mindset asset how many hours, how much time, how many drink, like, I guess it's how much time you spend thinking about alcohol or cannabis or social media or whatever. Okay. You can think about the relationships and the time you spend actually in relationship around those things. Okay. That's also, did you go out and have drinks with 3 friends and connect with those? That's also documenting reality. Okay. Then you can think about like the actual products, the number of drinks that you drank, the amount, the volume of that you drank, or however you want to measure that, what you actually drank. I had to go through doing that because I realized that most of the white wine I was drinking, I really didn't like. And all of this, what this does is it decreases our over desire. Okay. And as you go through this journey, you will decrease your over desire. Okay. Because that's what happens, because that's how, once we start recognizing where we are right now and that we want to create something different, we end up decreasing our over desire. That's just how, because our brains are seeking to make things easier, and when the tipping point comes when it seems easier, more enjoyable, or more pleasurable to get to the results that we actually want rather than the results that we have. And that's the tipping point, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing when you get there, because, and it's not because it's all unicorns and roses. I guarantee you, I still feel about half the time fairly terrible, and about half the time I feel really, really good. Okay. And I've by and large solved a lot of these problems. And so it's not unicorns and daisies. It's just understanding and living with your own emotional intensity makes everything look different. The blues are bluer. Everything smells like different, like more intense. Smelling is my like superpower. It's not what I'd really recommend to everybody, and it all smells more intense when I am not buffering, when I am not doing all the things that I said I was going to do instead, right? All of your processes, like we talk about building up processes, you can account for all of your processes of like going to the grocery store and buying alcohol and all of those, all the accounting processes, right? To figure out how much money you spent on booze. Okay. And then you have all of the stuff. Go count the number of bottles of liquor. Like, as part of this journey, we actually moved the bar. So I had a bar for my parents. They bought it in Argentina 9,000 years ago, and it held all the booze when I was a little kid. And then when we got the piece of furniture, we put all the booze in that piece of furniture in that bar, right? And then, I don't know, I think it was before Christmas, we ended up moving it all downstairs and repurposing that piece of furniture, that bar, for the printer and the scanner and all that sort of stuff. And we moved all of the bottles of liquor downstairs because we needed the space, and we just weren't drinking it anymore. And so now I don't even worry about it. Like, it's all down there, and we're like, I'm cooking. Do I have this stuff? And I think eventually we're just going to get rid of it all, but it's going to sit there for a while because you can't get rid of anything right now. So, telling yourself the truth about the things that you are doing instead of what you said you were going to do. What does that documentation look like? All right, you are all beautiful, amazing people. Let me know what questions you have. Always feel free to DM me. I love you all, and I will see you again tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to go through this very same thing about work. Whether you work outside the home, literally, like you get a paycheck for your work, or you don't get a paycheck for your work, you're still working. All right, I will see you all tomorrow. You're all beautiful, amazing people. I love you. Bye.